Hey, bro. Alright, so why don't you take a moment and close your eyes. Everybody just close your eyes. Now imagine the world of the future. Hold on. Okay. Okay, so close your eyes again. Imagine the world of the future. Now, what comes to mind? Probably flying cars, houses that do everything, robots. That's what you normally imagine. But instead, imagine a world of chaos and death. 165 million people gone. It could be your friends. It could be your family. It could even be you. You can open your eyes. No, this is not the Twilight Zone. This is what many scientists believe is the future. This is our problem if we fail to heed the warnings of viral chatter, which is what the basis of our problem was for the last 4 weeks. So you're probably wondering, what is viral chatter? Viral chatter is a term that was coined by Dr. Nathan Wolfe. This came from Tuttle right here. And Dr. Nathan Wolfe is a virologist and a biomedical. His field is in biomedicine. He spent almost a decade in the Sahara and Asia doing biomedical research on diseases. And the term viral chatter is a two-part thing. It's to refer to the emerging of zoonotic diseases in our world population due to the increased contact and domestication of animals, which will be discussed later in this presentation. There's also another idea behind viral chatter, is to look for virus X, which stands for the virus that we know is out there, but hasn't made itself known. But we continue to look for it can strike like a tiger. So, zoonotic diseases are a group of infectious diseases. They are transmitted between species, i.e., the rabid dog that bites you, the spider bite from the middle of the night. Those are some examples. Of the all known human pathogens that infect us, which is 1,415 known, 61% or 863 of those known are zoonotic in origin. Now there's two main types of infectious zoonotic diseases. There are the bacteria and the viruses. The bacteria are small microorganisms. They're tiny little creatures, if you will. And the ones we worry about are pathogenic bacteria. Now, pathogenic bacteria form a parasitic relation within the cells of the host. Basically, they'll get all nice and snug inside your cells and start messing around with it. And this is how they can cause disease and illness. Now, a virus is different. These viruses are made up of two different layers. There's the inner layer, where all the good stuff is, like the DNA and RNA. And then they have this hard, protein-based outer shell to protect the goods inside, until they can get into one of their hosts and start infecting and changing. And these can infect humans, plants, other animals, even other cells and microorganisms, and vice versa. So now that you have a little bit of an idea about what viral chatter and zoonotic diseases are, I will have my colleague, Danny, discuss several historically important zoonotic diseases and how these diseases came to be.
So, in history, many of the pandemics that have come about were actually caused by domestication of animals and plants. Domestication has caused about 60% of all pathogens in the human history, or that can affect the human body, are zoonotic, which are caused by domestication of animals. And over 75% of the current diseases that affect us nowadays are zoonotic, which also comes about with animals that we have domesticated in the past. Because before, humans were just hunters and gatherers and didn't have very many contact with animals. And so by doing that, we didn't have very much contact with the diseases that they carried. Some examples of things that have been transferred to us is rabies, which obviously can be passed on through a dog or even your horses or pets in general. The plague has been passed around by rats, and salmonella and influenza, which can be passed between pigs and poultry of different forms, or even wildlife can carry some of the diseases. Now, domestication of plants, though that doesn't seem like it could really spread that much disease, well, when you're farming, you have to keep your land wet, right? Well, by keeping it wet, you're also making a breeding ground for more insects. So you get more mosquitoes, which can spread West Nile or malaria. Not only that, but by farming, you have large amounts of grain, which attracts more animals, like rats. Some of the deadliest pandemics in history were, this is an infographic picture of the deadliest, and their size depends on how many people they've killed. And as you can see, smallpox is the biggest, and that's because it's been around almost the longest, and it's killed many people in different waves. And then from smallpox, it goes measles, and then Spanish flu, Black Death. And actually, HIV is bigger than the plague of Justinian, but HIV is actually a current thing, so it's been in history, but not as much. Talk about more about the plague of Justinian, which most people actually have never heard of. It's much like the Black Plague, but it was long before the Black Plague. And it was actually spread by ships coming from Egypt carrying grain that attracted rats. And the rats brought the plague to Europe. And at the time, Europe's population was about 50 million, 75 million. And this plague actually killed about 25 million people a year, which was about half of Europe's population over a span of 4 years. The symptoms included fever and chills, and bubo, which was the swelling of lymph nodes, which your lymph nodes are in your neck, your armpits, and your groin. And then it also caused seizures and skin discoloration. A key sign of, or a trait of the plague of Justinian, which kind of sets it apart, is hand necrosis, which means your hands start to turn black. And that was in between the years 541 and 750 AD. Number 4, which is the fourth biggest pandemic, was Black Death, and everybody's heard of it at some point in time, which is also a plague, and they're similar to Plague of Justinian. It was also bubonic, and bubonic is pretty much with the symptoms of bubo, or swelling of lymph nodes. It was between the time of 10,000 BC and 1979 when they finally came out with a treatment for it. It still comes up every now and then, but not in such great waves. When it was in Europe, it killed about, when it had the big wave, or when it was named Black Death, it killed about a third of the population in Europe, which was significantly greater than Plague of Justinian, but Europe had a bigger population in that point in time. It killed about 75 million people a year when it was back in its heyday, or when it was really spreading fast, and they didn't know what caused it. The reason why it's actually called Black Death is because when your blood was let from the boils, it was black. And it also caused gangrene, nasty stuff. Bubonic plague, which is obviously Black Death, and Plague of Justinian, is, as I said, swollen lymph nodes, but as it advanced, if you had it longer, it would turn into septicemic plague, which is where it spread through the blood system. And then it would turn into pneumonic plague, which is the most infectious type. And that's where it added its advanced stage, and it spread directly person to person. There was no fleas or anything else involved. It was just spread through the air because of droplets of saliva, or it spread through just being around people. It killed about 50% of all infected if it was not treated, and it was a pretty nasty plague that went around. Number 3 was actually the Spanish flu, or it was also influenza, and it was a type of H1N1 or regular influenza. It was just a mutated type. And because it was mutated, it caused a lot of problems. Like, it killed about 50% of people in Europe at that time that were fighting in the Great War, because it was in between 1918 and 1919. And it would kill people so fast they'd get infected with it that morning and they'd die by afternoon, because they would produce pneumonia. And the reason why this plague was so severe was because it killed people so quickly. And it also targeted people between 20 and 40, which was unheard of in influenza, which usually attacks the young and the old. It was kind of a strange one in many ways, but it killed many people, and actually half of the soldiers that went to Europe didn't fall from the war, they fell from Spanish flu. Also, back to the plague, one thing I forgot to mention was it's a bacteria, and the way how it attacks you is it actually injects toxins to your cells, to your defense cells, and so really it poisons you to death. Number 2 is the measles. And the measles were in between the 7th century BC and 1963. And they are an infection that's actually spread through the air, and it attacks your lungs. But this rash is a side effect, and it causes coughing and sore throat, but that's mostly because the rash goes into your body as well. And it kills about 200 million people a year when it was going crazy. And then the worst one is smallpox. And it was also between 10,000 BC and 1979 when they found a vaccine for it. And it caused vomiting, diarrhea, and lesions, which is, as you see here, killed about 50 million people a year, which was half of Europe's population at this time. And some examples of diseases that you hear every day nowadays is rabies again, which attacks you from the inside and goes to your brain where it mass produces, and which until you start behaving weirdly is when it first shows up, and that's when it eventually kills you because it just mass produces in your brain to an extent where it just makes you crazy. Influenza, or common cold, is actually a zoonotic disease, and that can be spread through the air or through touch or anything really. It's a viral infection that also attacks food. Salmonella, which we had an epidemic a few years ago where it was in the eggs, and that's usually where it's caused from, is uncooked food. That's usually where you get it. And it's actually a bacteria that attacks your in your stomach. It's like gastroenteritis, and it attacks your immune system. And then West Nile, which is obviously spread through mosquitoes, and it can affect animals and people, but it can also affect birds. But birds don't quite get the sickness; they just hold it until another mosquito comes and bites them, takes it. So they're kind of a host as well. And West Nile is a viral infection that can make you really sick as well. Now that you kind of get more of the history and the ones that you hear about on a daily basis, talk to you more about transmission or how they're spread. Lee, Daniel, and Bianca.
Learning a little bit more about the history. This is how the different diseases, viruses actually travel. is viral transmission and bacterial transmission can happen in many ways. There's airborne, not like airborne like flying in an airplane, more bodily projectiles, we'll get into that. But there's airborne, waterborne, contact, rodent, and insect. Examples of airborne would be coughing, sneezing, or creating bodily projectiles.
And also some examples of diseases that airborne has played a huge impact on is smallpox, influenza, and brucellosis.
Waterborne would be infected water consumption / absorption. So either drinking contaminated water or say you take a bath in contaminated water.
And some more examples of diseases would be E. coli, salmonella, and hepatitis A.
Contact is actually the most common. It's touching or sharing infected items or direct contact like light switches or doorknobs or cameras or computers, computer mice.
And some more diseases would be brucellosis, again, bubonic plague, and toxoplasmosis, which is in cats.
Rodents, mice, rats, hamsters, Furbies was a joke, but they look diseased. Mice and rats and hamsters, you know how they were talking about how they transmit different diseases. Primarily it was, I think the Black Plague.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit more, but.
Yeah, and again, like Daniel was saying, the plague held a really, really important role for the rodents since it started with them, and also rabbit fever and rabies.
Insects, mosquitoes and flies. I kind of went with mosquitoes primarily because that's West Nile virus, and we'll get into that a little bit more.
And these are transmitted from person to person, rodent to person, and insect to person. But remember that it's only transmitted when the infectious is infected.
Or the infected is infectious.
Yes.
Infectious being likely to be transmitted to people, organisms, etc., through the environment. Different viruses and bacteria actually take advantage of specific features in the environment like temperature, so heat and cold, and the moisture.
And now that you know a little bit more about how it's transmitted, Harrison's going to talk about the immune system and how our bodies fight off these diseases.
So you guys got the gist of transmission. Well, I'm going to be talking about the human immune system and how basically how your body fights off viruses that you got from animals or mosquitoes or anything. Oops, wrong button.
Sorry, don't do
There we go. Sorry about that. There's 3 cells in your body. 2 of them, which is the T cell and B cell, they're white blood cells. And then there's macrophages, which it's basically a large white cell, white blood cell that comes from the tissue. It's basically a mobile white blood cell, and it attacks the infected blood cells. T cells, they make up some of the immune system that fights off the viruses, fungi, parasites, or bacteria. And they T cells come from the thymus gland. B cells, they come from the bone marrow. They basically are a T cell, but it just helps the T cell fight off the infectious. And then there's macrophages, where macrophages are white blood cells, which I mentioned, but it's produced by monocytes, which are basically a white blood cell that has a oval nucleus, and it's clear with a grayish tint to it. And basically those blood cells are the three main that actually help our bodies fight off the viruses, parasites, and etc. And since after all this, you guys are going to be taught or learning about the current prevention of zoonotic diseases and strengths and weaknesses from Emily and Darian.
Alright. So, with knowing how the body can fight off some diseases, like there's some current preventions that we can like keep preventing from zoonotic diseases. And a big one would be technology, just like, researching all the different types and wondering, how you could pretty much just prevent from every disease from happening. Doctors could test it, and like by testing you could like draw blood from animals and humans, and it's pretty much the same. So, and with that blood sample you can like put it, like, I can't remember the name of the machine, but you put it in there and then it pretty much just separates the cells to see which one's infected. And then with testing and all that, like the doctors and everybody else can communicate like what zoonotic disease anybody has and all that stuff so that they can prevent from happening. Some of the most simple solutions are just washing your hands after, anything. Cook your meat very well and thoroughly. When you're around infected animals, of course, wear protective gear like gloves, masks, safety glasses, all that stuff. Vaccinate your animals. Make sure that their vaccinations are on contact. And then clean everything that's touched after someone, has been sick.
For the strengths and weaknesses, first is vaccinations and immunizations. And those are important because when you don't want to get sick, or when you are sick, you can get shots, and they're supposed to help prevent you from getting sick or getting the virus. A vaccination just is containing a germ that is either dead or weak, and your body's supposed to go and figure out how to take care of it. That way, if you get sick, your body knows what to do. And sometimes your body won't be able to take in the vaccination, and it'll pretty much resist it, so that gives you a better chance of being sick. Your body also does this with antibiotics and other things like that. And now Bianca and Daniel are going to talk to you about the diseases to most likely become a pandemic.
Okay, and what our problem statement left us with is like a question about what we think each individually, what disease would start a pandemic within the next 2 generations. And so Daniel and I are going to talk about some diseases that are most likely to cause a pandemic in the next 2 generations.
And not to sound repetitive, but the entire line from the problem statement was epidemiologists predict that within the next 2 generations there will be a worldwide pandemic or breakout that'll leave 165 million dead. And these are what Bianca and I got together and we thought of ideas, and also a little bit of a group effort. We asked opinions and thoughts of others to create the top 5 list. Top 5 starting out would be HIV or AIDS, which breaks that down into human immunodeficiency virus or acquired immune deficiency syndrome. And what HIV actually does is it lowers your immune system to allow something much more deadly to get in and be able to be transmitted. HIV itself does not have doesn't have any symptoms. It's when it actually evolves to AIDS that you will start to get symptoms of.
And currently in the US right now, there's 1.1 million people that have HIV, and there's close to almost 2 million people who don't know that they have HIV. And since the beginning of the epidemic, there's been 641,000 people that have died from HIV because they weren't treated with it, or treated for it, at least.
And they don't get treated if they don't know they have it.
Yeah.
Number 4 would be nasopharyngitis, which is also known as the common cold. It is a sickness of the upper respiratory tract that will cause coughing and sneezing, or will cause you to have those bodily projectiles that we brought up earlier. And having these coughs and sneezes and creating these bodily projectiles and being infectious would actually cause spreading to be much, would make spreading much more likely to happen.
And there is 62 million people per year that are affected with the cold. And it's not something that would cause death because we do have our like medicines and stuff nowadays, but it used to cause death before because people didn't know what to use, they didn't really know much about it, and so it would always cause secondary infections, and so that's what would cause death.
Number 3 would be influenza or the flu. What it is, it's a virus carried by birds and mammals, along with the familiar symptoms of like what the common cold would be, coughing, sneezing, aches, pains, headache. The flu can actually evolve into pneumonia, and pneumonia is actually very deadly on its own if it gets to be a serious enough case. I had something really good, but this also helps with the bodily projectiles because while you're coughing and sneezing, you're spreading something far more serious than just the flu or the common cold. Because once it actually evolves into pneumonia, you're spreading pneumonia once you're infectious.
And there's about 100,000 hospitalizations every year, and there's about, on average, 20,000 people that die each year from the flu.
Number 2 would be the plague, or bubonic or black plague. This is a flea that's from a rodent, which would be carrying the bubonic plague. And I'm actually going to use bubonic plague as an example. But a plague will infect and travel through your body and cause severe damage and pain. The bubonic plague goes to your lymph nodes and will actually cause severe swelling and hemorrhaging, which causes death and pain, and it's not quick. But it's the fleas that actually transmit it from one rat to the next Furby, to your child, so on.
And there's about 137 million cases of this from each reoccurring pandemic. And there's still cases every year, but it's still very, very rare when you do see a case of this nowadays.
And they actually say that they're definitely out there, the plagues are, they're just lying dormant. Number 1 would be West Nile virus. And the reason why we predicted West Nile virus, it's a mosquito-borne arbovirus, and mosquitoes, which most of you know, really like humidity. And with global warming becoming more and more obvious and more of a problem, like you guys remember how hot it was this summer? We got to use all this water to keep our grasslands cool. Farmers got to do it to keep their grasslands cool. We got to use it to put out all these fires, and it creates all this humidity that mosquitoes love. And if you get an infected mosquito in the area that starts reproducing and spreading, then that causes the likelihood of West Nile virus becoming a really huge problem to shoot up drastically. So that's why West Nile virus was chosen to be the number 1 most likely pandemic.
And since 1999, there's been 30,000 people alone that have reported getting sick with West Nile virus, and it's still happening today, so, I mean, it's still recurring.
And now knowing about what the top 5 predicted future pandemics and epidemics breakouts would be, Ashton is actually going to tell you about how we plan to protect ourselves in the future.
Thank you. So, with the possibility of a pandemic coming about, we have to start looking into future preventions and ways to settle this possible epidemic to become. So I want to hit on some of our ways that we're going to be planning on coming up with ways to prevent this in our near future. Alright, so I want to start off with a few main points that we're going to be using. One will be early detection, isolation, reporting, and surveilling the disease. With early detection, we can go in and get yearly checkups, make sure that we're all in top health, and to see if anything is out of ordinary. So if anything that's not supposed to be there that could be a possible disease, we need to know and see in case it's a new disease that comes up. And with blood testing, alongside with the yearly checkups, we can see if any microscopic viruses or bacteria is hiding in our blood and that we might not know of, for yet again new and possible ways of the viruses to be infecting us and whatnot. And then having public knowledge of all our known diseases, making sure we all know symptoms of the diseases that we do know of, making sure that we know what kind of diseases we do have, so that in the case of something else, we ourselves can know if something is out of whack. Once a new disease is broken out in, say, Paris, France, we can say, we can start isolation. This new disease is coming out and it's a threat. So we want to shut down all air traffic, all airports. And actually in 9/11, when we shut down all of our airports because of terrorist attacks, that dramatically reduced the H5N1 disease that we had going around. Next, after all airports are shut down, we would begin the ship ports. And all ships coming in and out of the city, those will be shut down and all the ports will be closed. So nothing can go international. And then we will tightly watch and restrict all civilian trafficking. So nothing. So we will know that it will not get outside the city. Then after the isolation and detection of this disease is begun, we want to report it. All our surrounding cities, all surrounding in the country of France would be known and alerted that the disease has been broken out, and for the other cities to be known. And if case, in need be, gather around an international meeting and alerts foreign countries and surrounding countries that a pandemic has broke out in the city and it is a possible threat. So we want to report this, and then after all this is going on, we want to alert all of the people, the civilians in the cities, what's going on, letting them know that this is happening, this pandemic's going about, and what they can do to watch out and be careful for the people around them in case some people also have it. Then we want to go into surveilling disease. Making sure we know every case, every person that has the disease, knows where this disease goes, and just knowing everything we can know about it. Make sure all the people that has it, we know where they are, how they're doing, making sure we know who they're in contact with, and just keeping a close eye on where this disease is at and where it is to possibly be going. And then into further actual preventing the disease in our own daily lives. We can get all our known vaccinations. We can begin to take all those vaccinations, make sure we're bestly protected that we can be. And then, begin research on new diseases that could be coming up, diseases that are complicated, very complicated, and that we don't have vaccinations yet. Further research, make sure we can know about that and get out vaccinations for that. And then watching for new symptoms. If say the common cold, the symptoms change, and the virus is evolving into a new threat. And then, making sure that we can develop new medicines, new vaccinations, and new ways to protect from the new evolving diseases. And staying on top of disease control, making sure if anything does break out, we're right there, we're right on top, and we're taking care of the problem as soon as we can. Now, in conclusion to our presentation today, I would personally, as well as our team, like to thank you for your time here with us today. Now, I would like to take the time to answer any questions you may have.
We would like to take the time, actually.
We would like to take the time.
You're better.
My bad. Yeah.
Question. Do you know how many cases of the bubonic plague did you say come out every year?
Yeah, Danny stated that one in her slide.
Yeah,
I'm
actually,
sorry.
no, it's fine. Back in its heyday, it killed about, if I remember right, 75 million people a year. And all in all, it killed about, let's see, 100 million people a year. if I remember right.
What are you talking about today?
I mean,
Today, there's not as many cases because we have developed a vaccine against bubonic plague.
Right, that's, yeah.
well, in Africa, there's about 900,000 people a year that get infected, but they're also treated. And in America, just in the United States, there's about 26 cases a year that come out. So very.
So you can treat it once
Yeah.
it isn't just necessarily fatal once you
Right.
get it.
It's a bacteria, so you just take
Antibiotics.
antibiotics.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry that I missed that.
no, it's all good.
Anything else?
So do you think it'll really come to that with all the technology and everything we've got going for us? That we're really gonna come to this horrible world that you described?
It's actually the medical field and the technology that's actually been keeping us from having a pandemic so far. But think, for example, if you get a cold and you start taking antibiotics, and you're like, oh, hey, I feel so much better, and you stop taking your antibiotics. The bacteria in you actually has built up an immunity to that antibiotic. It has evolved. So if that evolved form of your cold actually spreads, that person won't be able to use antibiotics. So if we get like a ton of people with HIV, so their immune system is down or has been lowered, and you spread your evolved form of the cold, what are antibiotics for us?
Right.
So it's waiting for or anticipating something that has evolved, and it's this spiral chatter like from you to Patrick behind you, or from you to Sarah, that would actually be like, this is how you prevent, this is how you not die from antibiotics, and it's that chatter that keeps antibiotics from working. So it's just anticipating something like that.
So in the medical field, did you guys look into what are the future, like obviously our antibiotics we've misused or overused or that sort of thing. Did you look into what are different angles they're trying to approach to defend us?
Immunizations.
They're doing that, but then they're also taking our own blood or our own immune system, reprogramming it in a way, and putting it back into us to attack cells that they know are foreign. It's kind of a new thing that's going on, and they're still working on it. There's a case that came out just recently about leukemia, and what they did is they took a little girl's T cells out and introduced HIV to them, but it's an inactive HIV, so it still attacks T cells, changes it to where it attacks its own body, but is not as deadly, I guess. Put it back into her body, and then those T cells attacked the B cells, which helped the cancer. And so it actually, her body attacked its own cancer, and she was cured.
Did she have HIV now?
No,
she just
it was, yeah, it was unactive HIV, so it wasn't the same, it was deactivated.
They modified her T cells by
Okay.
first introducing it to HIV,
Okay.
Yeah,
then introducing it, or
our body.
programming it to think, attack these cells, these
Yeah.
are the bad
Okay.
cells.
Yeah, and
Wow.
they're
Put it
still
back in.
working on that. The downside is it still attacks the healthy B cells as well as the bad B
Mm.
cells. But with our technology, you can just do white blood cell infusions or blood infusions.
It's like having
Well,
100,000 oh, sorry. No, you go.
Okay, well, and like another thing that she was talking about with leukemia, they tried it on a few more people and it didn't work. So I mean, it's only working with like the types that are actually that it's like flowing through their body and killing the right cells. And
Right.
so it's still just a huge
It's still
research
in
project,
process,
so.
but that is an idea. But personally, I think the pandemic that is more likely to attack us might not be a bacteria, it might be a virus, because viruses are a lot harder to get rid of. There's no antibiotics for viruses, just vaccines. And some vaccines, you can't make a vaccine of something that's so deadly that you can't weaken it or dilute it. So, yes.
Technology can help a lot, but can also work against us a lot
Yeah.
because I think they were talking about one of the plagues that we were talking about.
Oh.
It takes a while for them to even realize that, to even get symptoms, to know that they're infected. So in that time period, with today and like travel, you can within 24 hours be anywhere else in the world, and you can infect so many people just by traveling from one place to another. You can infect a whole entire airport, and then that it spreads. So that's a big threat.
That's another case that we studied as well is a guy that was working at a college went infected himself with smallpox, and there's about 2 weeks of time where smallpox doesn't show up at all, and you're still infectious. And he went to every public area you can possibly go to, like concerts, planes, airports, stuff like that. And then right before he started to show signs, like at the end of his 2 weeks, he killed himself. And they didn't know that it was him. But then all of a sudden, smallpox started showing up all over the world, and they're like, where did this come from?
But by the way, this was a hypothetical.
Yes.
And-
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sarah brings up a good point. Technology does definitely help
Yeah.
the virus. One other aspect we didn't really delve into is bioterrorism.
Yeah.
I mean, you get one like
Spanish flu was actually thought to be a bioterrorism from Germans. They thought that the Germans released it on the soldiers, and that is how it came about.
And I think we're hearing more and more about bioterrorism, like it's actual.
Yeah, it can be a thing. And actually, like the Spanish flu, they found the reason why it did not spread crazy and kill more people than it did was because it was very hard for it to spread person to person. It spread from bird to person. And that is actually what saved us. And they did research, and they found that only 5 genes in that strain, if they were switched, it become airborne, which would just spread like wildfire. And they actually had to put like a confidential classified on that case. Nobody's allowed to look at it because if it goes into the wrong hands. Bioterrorism right there. It wouldn't take much because considering, like I said earlier, if one person got infected that morning, it died that afternoon. It spread so fast and it affected you so quickly. It actually turned your body against itself, and then as well as attacked yourself and turned into pneumonia so quickly that if it was airborne, it would be just crazy.
if you think about it, like on the bioterrorism half, I mean, they can just as easily do stuff like that. I mean, it's not like you have to be like IQ of like 300 to do it.
Right.
I mean, someone could easily go to college, get a degree in that field, and get some job where they have access to that lab and materials. It's a real threat, and it's completely possible.
But on the technology note, the statement will always be true. We're limited by the technology of our time.
Right.
And while it does work with us, the fact that we've got the shipyards, in the airplanes really does cause this high spread rate, and that's how it can go from one place to another in under 24 hours.
Right.
So not only are we limited by the technology of our time, but we're unlimited.
And technology can actually harm us as well, because I know from experience, I had a cold and they gave me antibiotics in the hospital. By giving me antibiotics, they killed all the good bacteria in my gut, which caused me to get C. diff, which is it's like a bacteria that's it's called C. diff because it's difficult to get rid of, and it's a super bug, and I got that by taking antibiotics. And so it's kind of like kill a cold that can kill you, or not get,
Infect you.
yeah, or
It is an antibiotic can help you with cold.
well, it wasn't really a cold, but it was a, yeah.
That leads on what I was gonna say is that it's, you know, as, it's the public's responsibility, it's each of our responsibilities in a lot of these instances. I know that, my pediatrician had the most difficult time teaching parents. Just because you come to the doctor, you don't need to leave with a prescription. And, you know, that we really have to listen. It's just like your doctor's giving you that and you didn't treat it, but you build up a resistance. The other thing, and I know for a fact that remembering to give my kids all of their antibiotics when they were little, because they start feeling good and they're running around in 2 or 3 days. And then I've got something in the refrigerator that, you know, I've got 3 kids, so I'm not thinking. And I mean, I really had to start, you know, putting timers on the oven. I mean, no kidding, because I would forget, and I was so convinced that we have a big role to play in this. But the other thing is, I know a case of someone I know where she was expected to be at work when she was visibly ill. She was sounding sick, she was visibly ill. It's happened with several young people I know. It is like employers just don't get it. They are, I cannot be without you, we have nobody to cover, and they put all this guilt and pressure on you, and then they don't expect you to wear a face mask, you know. And if you're in the food service industry and you are going somewhere and you are sick, and you're going because you might lose your job and you can't afford to lose your job, then that's the employer's fault. And there should be, I mean, I really believe that there should be some kind of regulations, and I'm not one for passing laws at all. But we've got to have some kind of statement to the public about what, you know, and out to employers about what signs should you not allow your employees to come to work, and how that might be monitored you know, by the health department in some ways, you know, talking to employees and seeing if they're required to come to work even if they're sick, and, you know, what ways can they bring a doctor's, you know, what do they have to do to prove that they're sick? Because we know that people misuse that too. They say that they're sick and they're not. But when somebody is visibly sick and you're still expected to be at work, then that becomes a problem, you know. And then the last thing I'm gonna say, because I was late and I'm sorry, but this is really interests me, in the media. The media has such an impact on our country. And if they would get together and not be catastrophic, but give out just information, the facts, and nothing more about things that we can do, and then stress those. You know, that's not interesting. It's not, you know, it's not anything like what we've been through this last couple of weeks, and I think we all know how much misinformation was given about a situation that happened, and the media does that. And, you know, they could spend a lot more time on information that would really help us. And we as consumers with the media need to do something about that. We need to be turning off channels, calling into TVs, and making those choices.
And there was actually Nathan Wolf, Alan brought him up. If you go to the TED website, there's a video that he did that it talks about how he suggested this international social thing that would, Nathan Wolf, mind if I read it up?
Go ahead.
And basically he talks about, he lists amazing ideas on how to basically create this hospital social network of, okay, we've got this here, does anybody else have it? And if they don't have it or somebody else have it, then they find ways on how that could have got there. And it's amazing, the idea that he just came up with, and it's got a cool acronym too. I just can't remember what it is, but
I believe he actually got that started. It was the Global Viral Detection Initiative, and basically he went to all these different health institutes globally, and basically if they get get the whispers of an outbreak, they let every other institute that's part of this initiative know, hey, we might have some here, be ready.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
Great.
like I said, when I got, the action went down in the hospitals at Denver, it got to where they wouldn't let me into the hospital at all, because they actually kind of kicked me out because I had C. diff and it was spreading real fast, because it can just live on objects. If I touched a handrail, that's probably how I got it, yeah, it was crazy. But going to Children's, they wouldn't let me in there, they wouldn't let me into the Institute of the University of Colorado.
There's no quarantine
Oh,
areas?
no, yeah, there's a quarantine. I wasn't supposed to leave. I wasn't allowed to leave my apartment. I couldn't go downstairs, especially since the kids down there were very, very sick. And if I spread it to them, it could have really killed them. But yeah, it's crazy.
So they did put you in quarantine in a hospital?
No, not in a hospital, but in my apartment building. It was more of the apartment put me on quarantine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how does that work, that hospitals won't accept somebody? I mean, that spreads it more.
They kind of accepted me, but not quite. They kind of wanted me out. Because by me staying there, if a nurse didn't follow protocol exactly like they're supposed to, they could have spread it to another patient. Or if I went to the cafeteria, I could have spread it to another patient. And so they just wanted me to stay in my apartment for a week until I wasn't infectious anymore.
Maybe we need big quarantine areas.
Yeah.
That people can be serviced and taken care of.
Yeah.
Could someone talk a little bit about the lymphatic system and how your body tries to purify a little bit more? Because you guys touched upon it, but there wasn't too much discussion of the
lymph nodes.
Yeah.
I only got that from lymphatic.
Okay, your lymph nodes are areas in your body that produce antigens, things to fight off sicknesses, and they're in your neck, your armpits, and your groin, and they pretty much help out with attacking your sicknesses in your body. And when things infect your lymph nodes, it's almost like game over, because lymph nodes is where things are like your T cells mass produce or anything. Like if you're sick and you notice, say you have strep or a sore throat, if you feel right here and it's really swollen, that means your lymph nodes are in overdrive pretty much. They're just reproducing a lot to attack whatever sickness you have. And it happens all over your body depending on where you are, like lymphoma, which is cancer of the lymph nodes. All your lymph nodes are swollen because that's where they're being attacked pretty much.
And that sends it out to the rest of your body.
Yeah. So like the plagues or bubonic plague, bubonic is stands for bubo, swollen lymph nodes, and it's just because your lymph nodes are being attacked. The bacteria, which is the plague, attacks your body's immune system pretty much, which attacks your lymph nodes and injects toxins to destroy it pretty much, so you have nothing to fight it back, and then it just mass produces, because then it's just, has a heyday, and it actually mass produces under your skin, so your skin will look bruised or discolored, because that's actually your bacteria. And when another flea comes on your skin and bites you, it gets that bacteria and then spreads it to another person. And that's another reason why when the blood is let from boils or whatever that's on your body, that's why it's black, is because it's hemorrhaging from the bacteria, and it is the bacteria as well.
Just for clarification, because I know Alan did a good job of introducing this, but what are you using for a definition of zoonotic?
Zoonotic is a disease or virus that can be transmitted between
Different species.
Or
different species.
originates from a different species.
So the species are just carriers, or
well,
they can be
there's-
infected also?
Well, there's the zoonotic disease, and then there's something called zoonosis. And a zoonotic disease is a disease that has its origins from other animals. And then zoonosis is the transmission between species, like, you know, the rabid dog that bites you, that would be zoonosis.
Human to human, animal to human.
And
Something like
zoonotic, it all doesn't just mean animals. Plants can be zoonotic, fungi can be zoonotic, even microorganisms can have zoonotic-based diseases.
There's person, insect person, rodent person, animal person. When you get into the animals, it's primarily mammals.
Right.
So,
Or birds and
I think I'm
reptiles.
a little more confused than I was, because
Okay,
you're drawing
man.
the line between West Nile, which birds are infected, they do die from it, and the mosquito transmits it from the bird to the human, right?
The bird acts as
But you
a,
have drawn a line at malaria. You didn't talk about malaria, which is an insect borne, but the insects don't get sick.
Right.
Is that the line, or, I mean, I guess since I didn't do this
I
problem,
thought
I'm
it was-
still kind of trying to wrap my brain around
I'm not sure.
how do you define
Okay,
Well,
so,
well, I don't know, just like, from what I understood about malaria, like, it was somewhat of a parasite that caused malaria.
Mhm.
And then with most zoonotics, it's a bacterial or a viral.
zoonotics is still a parasite, so malaria is a zoonotic disease. And that
It is?
is zoonosis, yes, because it's transmitted through insects, which makes it zoonotic.
That's not necessarily true. That insect could just be part of that parasite's life cycle.
or a better example is the bubonic plague. The rats have the fleas that carry
Yeah.
it. They don't have it, they carry it. And,
The rats don't actually have,
no,
yeah.
and it's the fleas that give it to humans. They're susceptible to it. They
Well,
can,
Rats can have it too, and they can spread it to humans as well, but it's usually the fleas that spread it.
So rats can get bubonic plague, or they can't?
They can.
Or they can't?
It actually affects them?
They found out that in heavily populated rat areas, the rats are dying as well, and that's why they thought that it was the rats that were spreading it. But it was really the fleas on the rats.
The prairie dogs die from what?
So it isn't just an animal carrying an insect, that's not the difference versus one that has one that transmits it to you.
Right,
it's carriers versus infected,
right.
Yeah, I think you
infectious.
might want to think about a
Actually-
different definition than carrier.
The plague was not really,
Transmit.
many people think the plague was carried by the rats, but really it was carried by the fleas, and you can get the plague
Well,
from a cat, a dog, prairie dogs, anything really that had those fleas.
I think of it as, I want to use radio terms for this, because there's the transmitter, which would be like a flea. There's the receiver, which would be like we think of something that we can get, but we can't transmit it, like a virus or some viruses. And then there's transceivers, people who can get it and transmit it. So like
It's
the
kind of
cold, I pick it up from the doorknob and I sneeze on Danny.
Yeah, or it's like, if the host is insect, animal, reptile, anything that is not human species, or if the host is that, or the transmitter, or the thing that is transmitting it to other people are of another species, it makes it zoonotic.
And how come certain sicknesses will not affect them, the carriers, other living things, but only certain living things? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Anatomy?
I think probably evolution has a little bit of a hand to play in
I think
that.
it also has to do with genes. because certain genes are certain sicknesses affect certain genes in that host, and if a host doesn't have those genes, then it doesn't affect them. Does that make sense? Kind of. So like, say, let's see, birds have different genes than humans. If a sickness that affects birds, it affects the genes that the birds have, but since we don't have those genes, it wouldn't affect us, or vice versa.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Yeah, so like sicknesses that dogs get or animals get, we wouldn't get, some of them we can.
So do you guys still look at doorknobs the same after studying this problem?
I almost wanted to make a joke and start passing around the hand sanitizer after this whole thing.
We all want some. Doesn't it make you, like, when you're more aware of the disgustingness?
Yeah.
And it's everywhere, so if you become more like, I mean, just like she said, I mean, it's our responsibility. Do you feel like do you wash your hands more today than you did I don't know.
I will.
One thing that really makes you think about that is that most of the sicknesses that affect us today are fecal-oral, and which is actually spread by just not washing your hands after you go to the bathroom and touching light switches or doorknobs. And that's how most people get sick, is why that makes you think differently.
Here's another thing you wouldn't like. Once upon a time, there was an episode of something that's not even real, but he was wearing goggles that let him see bacteria, germs, any form of bug, and basically it was like wearing night vision goggles outside during the daytime. It was not even worth it. They were everywhere. So you're kind of just like, you even sitting here, you're like,
Well, a doorknob is the least clean thing in a home. And I don't know if you guys brought that up earlier, but, and also the telephone and the light switch. I mean, you know, I know it's having, cleaning my own house. I mean, I had to be educated about that, so I would remember to wipe those things.
My home has a protocol to clean all that stuff, but mostly because I was living in a place where it had to be very, very sterile, because I lived in a house with kids with cancer, and one wrong move could have killed a kid. And so we have a protocol, because we took it, we kind of adopted it, and so not seeing it in our house. We Lysol all the light switches, handles, bars, walls, everything, every week.
But you can't go too crazy with those things because you do need to be exposed to them in order to
Well, yeah.
benefit.
Yeah.
But there's certain things that we could educate people and have a protocol, you know?
Yeah.
A nationwide protocol or a worldwide protocol.
Yeah.
Especially when
Most people don't think about washing their chairs, just backs of your chairs, and everybody grabs onto a chair, whether to use it to put their shoes on or to pull it out.
can we just get a black light in here so we can like not want to touch anything?
Freak everybody out.
Gross.
I really super liked this presentation a ton because it was one of the best ones I've seen, I think, in my opinion.
Well, thank